For Sunday, the 5th of March, I'm Randy Couray. This is What's Up the Sports podcast. We are live via Twitter Spaces if you're downloading today's episode or catching it on YouTube. We appreciate you as always. We are in the stretch drive of the NHL regular season. The trade deadline has passed us on Friday, and it's a real treat to welcome today's panelists for chat about some puck. Liam Gotimer is the Director of Broadcasting and Communications for the Atlanta Gladiators of the East Coast Hockey League and joins us from the ATL. Liam, how are you?
I'm doing really well, Randy. Thank you so much for having me and Will on your podcast, and I'm ready to talk some hockey.
No, it's pleasure is mine, definitely. And speaking of Will, he is Will Pesek. He is a producer for News 12 out of Hunter Valley, in the Long Island, New York area, and just came off a shift from 2 a.m. And is gracious. He's running on fumes, but he looks beautiful. Will, thank you so much. How are you?
Yeah, totally, happy to be here. This is my weekend routine. I really don't get much sleep. I come home. NASCAR's on today, 3:30. I'll be watching that. No hockey on today. Islanders or Rangers. Can't watch any of that. But we'll have some basketball to watch today. But everything's very good. Thanks for having us on your show, Randy. Really appreciate it.
No, definitely looking forward to it. Thank you so much. So, guys, as mentioned, the NHL trade deadline has come and gone, and it was really difficult to kind of pinpoint where to start. I'm assuming you boys don't want to talk about the fact that Shea Weber has been traded, but I figured, close to you guys, in Broadway, might as well start with the New York Rangers, and they did make a splash as they picked up Stanley Cup champion Vladimir Tarasenko. He is on his way to Broadway after spending his entire career with St. Louis. This year has been a struggle. Coming, with 38 points in 50 games. But you know what? Before we get into that, Will, like the NHL trade deadline, forgive me, I did kind of jump the gun here. I mean, now that everything has been said and done, are you able to summarize the trade deadline maybe in 5 words or less?
Chaotic until it got boring. And I say that because all the moves were happening a week away, a couple days away, and then on Friday, we really didn't have the headliner move. We thought it was going to be James Van Riemsdyk. A deal was in the works with Detroit. That obviously fell through, but we're forgetting who kicked off the whole trade party. That was Lou Lamoriello, the former Maple Leaf GM, Kurt Islander president of hockey operations. He kicked it off All-Star Weekend down in Sunrise, Florida, when he got Bo Horvat for the first-round pick, Atu Ratu, and Anthony Beauvillier. And ever since then, it's been a flurry of moves. A couple days later, you said the Rangers got Tarasenko, and then it was just a pivot, one to the next, one to the next, one to the next. I have a shocker that I was surprised got moved with a term, but I'll get to that later on. But Randy, if I had to summarize it, chaotic until it got boring, because it's true. It was Tuesday. We thought it was a deadline. Everybody was getting moved on Tuesday. And then Friday, I guess the headliner was Curtis Lazar going to Jersey. So that was the big move on Friday.
I mean, if you want to summarize the NHL trade deadline as that's so NHL, the fact that all these trades take place before the actual deadline day itself. And Will, you mentioned of Bo Horvat. I did tease Tarasenko. That Patrick Kane fellow is heading to Broadway as well. Liam, were you surprised that so many big names have switched jerseys for this trade deadline window?
Yeah, I was just really surprised that a lot of the contending teams went for it. If you look at any team, especially in the Eastern Conference, I'll go into the West as we move along in the show here. But if you look at all of the top-end Eastern Conference teams, even teams that are in the wild card race like the Islanders, they all went for it. Maybe outside Carolina, who acquired Jesse Puljujarvi, but the Devils, they acquire the biggest name at the deadline in Timo Meier. I think he's a bigger name than Patrick Kane. The Rangers acquire Kane and Tarasenko. The Boston Bruins acquire Garnet Hathaway and Dmitry Orlov, and I think that those two players are going to help Boston so much in the stretch run. And you're adding two crucial pieces, two pieces that are going to help immensely in the postseason to one of the greatest teams in NHL history, at least statistically, in the Boston Bruins, who are on the precipice of 50 wins. The Toronto Maple Leafs, we'll talk about them as the show goes along. They added a multitude of players all throughout their lineup. The Tampa Bay Lightning, they overpaid for Tanner Jeannot. We'll talk about that. But I think at the end of the day, I think that all of the teams who were contending and saw a window to win the Stanley Cup went full on to try and make that a reality. So,
Randy, if I could just feed off Liam,
please.
Something I noticed when doing that. Liam said all of the Eastern Conference teams went for it, but can we make the point that the winner of the East is going to win the Stanley Cup? Because aside from the Dallas Stars, who got maxed only, the Eastern Conference had all the big moves. And then Carolina bolted their bullpen with Shane Goss to spare. There's not one team in the Eastern Conference that should look at themselves in a Stanley Cup final and say, you are an underdog. That includes any of the wild card teams. Any of the wild card teams.
Well, I was going to mention this in the towards the end of the show, but I mean, no better time than the present. Like, I wonder if all these moves are for naught, because look at the Boston Bruins. I mean, they're playing like the Canadians of the 70s. They're just completely ripping it. And I mean, in the end, who is Linus Ullmark as a goaltender? I mean, like, he's having a great year. Hey, he's got a heck of a goal scoring touch as well. But you think of where Boston is. Do they have the goaltending, the proven goaltending? Igor Shesterkin has been dubbed one of the two greatest goalies currently. Maybe Vasilevsky still has a leg up on him. That being said, Tampa has played so much hockey over the past 3 years. Kind of sucks when you go to. Yeah, kind of sucks, I guess, when you go to three straight Cup finals. But hey, I mean, yeah, no, I mean, it's just really. I don't know if anything can happen in the playoffs, right?
Now, let me ask you this, Randy and Liam. Do you think teams like the Red Wings and teams outside of that wild card spot sold off so quickly because, like Randy said, that they maybe came to the realization, if we get in, we're going to play Boston in round one. Is it worth selling assets to potentially get swept in 4 games by the Boston Bruins? Now, I ask myself the same question. As an Islander fan, we traded away a first-round pick, Atu Ratu and Andy Mobilier, to potentially, most likely, play the Bruins in a round one matchup. Is that ideal? Absolutely not. But as saying goes, anybody could get in. But I'm curious, what do you guys think? Do you guys think teams were afraid to realize, hey, we don't want to sell too much because even if we get in, we cannot beat Boston?
Liam?
Yeah, well, I'll touch on that first. And, you take a look at some of the teams in the Eastern Conference wildcard, like you mentioned, Will. I think Detroit, as much as they sold off, they also wanted to buy. You just said it at the beginning of the podcast. They wanted to acquire James Van Riemsdyk from the Philadelphia Flyers, just couldn't make the dollars work. But I think just generally in the broader perspective of what you're saying, Will, I think that many teams are, looking at the teams at the top of the Eastern Conference. How many wildcard teams can honestly look at their group and say, yeah, we can beat Carolina in a 7-game series?
I think Pittsburgh,
New Jersey, the Rangers, or Boston. Not many is my point. And when you conversely look at the upcoming draft class and the top 3 players that are going to be available, Connor Bedard is the best player to come through the NHL entry draft since Connor McDavid. And you got Michkov and Fantelli, who are right behind them at 2 and 3 respectively. You can place them however you want, but these teams have a chance for those 3 players. And if it means selling off and towards the latter end of the season, losing your fair share of games to get yourself in better draft position, I think that's something that general managers around the league are not going to shy away from. So that's why I see teams like Washington selling off. You see Ottawa buying with Jacob Chychrun, but Pittsburgh, trying for that one last run. But there are some teams who are looking at this draft and are really salivating, and that's why they're selling off maybe a little bit more prematurely than they would have otherwise.
I think my opinion in this is that just because you want to tank doesn't mean that the players are going to tank for you. I mean, they are in the league, and they are obviously want to make a long run in their career. management and ownership can say and wish and do whatever they want, but doesn't mean that the players are going to buy in. As a Toronto Raptors fan, years ago, there was this push to tank for Andrew Wiggins, and Masai Ujiri, the general manager, made trades. He traded Patrick Patterson and John Salm got Patrick Salm. Long story short is that they made a run. They got rid of Rudy Gay, and then ever since that draft class with Wiggins, Raptors didn't tank per se, and they won a championship, and now they're obviously now for Victor Wembanyama. Apparently, he's going to be the second coming of Christ, and just like Connor Bedard, the fact of the matter is that only one team gets these guys. So I mean, you mentioned Santilli, and are they at the level of Connor Bedard? Apparently not. So I mean, like, throw away a season, but you have such a limited chance, to get this blue chipper.
And if I can add to that, you made a really good point, Randy. And, I'll direct our attention to the Ottawa Senators, who came out earlier in the week prior to the trade deadline and said, we believe in this group. We want management to believe in this group. It was Derek Brassard who just had his 1,000th game against the Rangers and, of course, scored 2 goals. But I digress. But again, that is the Ottawa Senators front office listening to their players and understanding that they're not going to tank for us and that we're close enough to the wild card race. And that's why they went out and acquired a big piece at the deadline. Now, I'm sure we'll talk about as the show goes on. But you make a really good point, Randy. And for sure, prospects at the end of the day are just prospects. And as hyped up as Mitch Gov and Fantelli and Bedard are, you never know until they hit the ice how they're going to impact players, teams around the NHL.
Well, I mean, Liam, and that's something that I wanted to touch on too. I put it out on Twitter yesterday. Shannon Hogan, who reports for the Islanders for MSG Network, she asked Lou Lamoriello that same exact question. Is in recent memory, they've traded away all their first-round picks, right? 2019, they traded away for J.G. Pajot. The following year was Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac. This year was for Alexander Romano. Next year's was for Bo Horvat. So they asked the question to Lou Lamoriello, you're trading away all your first-round picks to win right now. What does your future look like? And Lou Lamoriello simply said, he said, look at all of our guys who we got for a first-round draft pick. I signed them to long-term deals. Pajot got 6. Palmieri got 5. Romanov got 3. Bo Horvat got 8. And he said, look at the guys who they took. Are any of them going to have an impact now or in the next 4 or 5 years? The answer is no. So teams are realizing, hey, if we don't have a shot to win number 1, number 2, maybe even number 3, go all out. Vancouver got a first-round pick from the Islanders for Bo Horvat. That's top 12 protected. Vancouver said, you know what? We don't view that pick to be worth anything. We'll trade it to Detroit. Welcome, Philip Roddick. So teams are saying to themselves, we don't like the options where we're going to be. We'll trade it away.
Yeah. And I mean, Vancouver, we're going to touch on Vancouver because, I mean, that team just seems to be an absolute dumpster fire. But, I mean, anyway, we'll get to that in a few moments. What I did want to show, fellas, obviously with Will being in New York and Liam now in Atlanta, in case if you guys weren't aware, Canadians are really into hockey. And the fact of the matter is that NHL trade deadline is basically a hockey fan's Christmas. And it's basically morning, afternoon, and evening of trade deadline day coverage. I did want to show you guys what TSN looks like during trade deadline. And you can see that we have a full crazy beyond panel of, I'm counting 12 people at their various desks. And it's no different for the other sports station, national sports station here in Canada. I do have to ask, fellas, in a hockey perspective, does anything even remotely come close during trade deadline day coverage in the U.S.?
No, well, trade deadline coverage is phenomenal here, and here actually in the States, what you just showed, NHL Network aired all day.
So I
But
know. Sorry, let Liam, please.
real quick, on the flip side, I will say that the coverage of the NHL by ESPN in the United States, who currently has a deal with the National Hockey League, is abysmal. Michael Kay showed up on First Take, the show with Stephen A. Smith, and he was asked who is going to be the first New York team to win a championship. And he smacked his hand on the desk and said Rangers. And the first words out of Stephen A. Smith's mouth was, "Oh, Lord, they don't count. They don't count." And even the host said they don't count. We're talking about real sports here, baseball and football and basketball. He didn't say real sports, but of course, that's what many people are insinuating. And it was received with a ton of backlash. So Randy, I'll actually disagree with Will here, and I'll say that the panel that we just saw in that picture on TSN is unlike anything we'll see in the United States. Look, Will is absolutely correct in that the NHL Network airs exactly that, but they don't put on their own production like that.
Right.
You know, they're only posting that because, or they're only showing that because they know that that is the epitome of hockey coverage on NHL fans' Christmas Day, which of course is the NHL trade deadline. So I think that the coverage of hockey in the United States is subpar, to say the least. And
but at the same time, I understand why that the United States and ESPN, they don't cater to hockey as much. I love hockey; it's my favorite sport, right? But in the United States, right, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, they all played on the same team here. James Harden played on the same team here. That was the story in New York, was the Brooklyn Nets for many, many years. The Mets getting Scherzer, DeGrom, Verlander, that was the story. The Yankees and Rodon, that was the story. Hockey became on the back burner because people in New York don't know much about the Islanders or the Rangers that much. Like on a typical day, you turn on the sports radio in New York. Today, they're talking about Ja Morant and the gun allegations in the nightclub in Memphis. But if you turn on sports talk in Montreal, they're talking about the Montreal Canadiens. That's the difference between the two countries, is that this time of year, hockey is an afterthought. But come playoff time, Randy, Liam can attest, come playoff time, everybody's a hockey fan. I'm an Islander fan that say, game one today, we're winning. I'm like, where have you been all year? Where have you been all season? It's true. Everybody all of a sudden now is a Ranger fan. Patrick Kane, Ranger fan. I'm like, where have you been all season? Trade deadline's here. We're going to jump out of the – come on. So Liam's right. USA will never see the coverage Canada gets, but NHL Network does air that, and they have no choice because they can't put on that type of production because Canada just outdoes everybody in that category.
Well, why is that? I mean, we are going to talk trade deadline. No, I swear, I promise. But no, this is such a great conversation, and it's something that I am personally interested in. Hockey fans in my country are interested in. Why hasn't it taken off in the U.S.? I mean,
I just think because basketball is superior. You know, I think
But so is football.
No disrespect to the great country of Canada, but out of all the football teams, there's not one in Canada. The closest one is the Buffalo Bills. Out of all the NBA teams, there's only one in Toronto. Where in the NHL, you have Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa, Calgary. There's so many teams in the NHL that they have the multi-country coverage. And now the NHL is trying to expand their league into Czechia, into Germany, into China, where the NFL is doing the same thing, but with England. So I think in the United States that they care more about what Kevin Durant is doing now in Phoenix. They care more about if the Chicago Bulls were going to trade for Zach LaVine to the Knicks, and if the Knicks were going to get Pascal Siakam, and now spring training's happening. What's going to happen? And same thing with baseball, right? There's only one team, and that's in Toronto. You guys had the Expos. But I think the United States, they just cater more to what sports that they know drives the most force.
No, I completely agree and get that. But I mean, why doesn't it drive? Why now? There's a couple of theories off the top of my head, and boys, I'd love to get your opinion on this. Is it because basketball and football players have more personality? Hockey players, I mean, honestly, it's like watching linoleum curl, I swear. Like, with all due respect, I mean, like, I there's nothing more that I love to see than my Maple Leafs win a Stanley Cup. But they don't have much of a personality, number one. Number two, is it possible that the United States is not the most superior at this point, I mean, obviously, when it comes to Olympic hockey, 1980 was a miracle on ice, a major sports story in the United States. But they haven't won when NHL participation took place. World Cup of Hockey, it's not a consistent 4-year stretch. Is that something that may be a reason why?
Well, Randy, I'll attest to your first point about the NHL players not necessarily having a ton of personality, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think when you compare players like James Harden, who will have these colorful interviews, or LeBron James, who will make headlines with whatever he says in the post-game presser or whatever, and then you compare that to Casey Cizikas, like we were just talking about, or even Patrick Kane, who is the most, soft-spoken superstar in the world. If you ask him, how'd you do tonight when you lost to the Boston Bruins on a Saturday afternoon, he'd probably say, oh, we could have done better. We got to work out as a team. We're going to gel. But if you ask LeBron James after he gets blown out, maybe you'll have a little bit of a different answer, a little bit of more colorful conversation with whoever's asking. And just going back to what Will said as well, I think that the NHL, quite frankly, does a poor job of marketing its superstar players. If you see Kevin Durant getting traded to the Phoenix Suns, you saw it everywhere. And that trade dropped when, Will? Like 1 a.m., midnight?
And
Patrick
everybody
Kane
had
got
it.
traded, outside of the Rangers Twitterverse and, of course, hockey fans, nobody knows. And Patrick Kane is the greatest American-born player of all time. He's got 3 Stanley Cup
And
under his belt.
that's exactly what I was going to say next, Liam. And Randy, you were saying how the USA has kind of shifted from being superior in the hockey category, right? But like Liam said, the lack of coverage of their stars. If Connor McDavid walked down the street in Times Square, Manhattan, maybe 1 or 2 people would say, that's Connor McDavid, arguably going to go down as the best hockey player any of us has ever seen. Now, if somebody saw LeBron James in any other country, they would know who that player is. And I think Liam said it right. Patrick Kane is the best American hockey player we've ever seen. Maybe second is Mike Modano. Maybe a third, Kenny Morrow. The best Canadian hockey player.
Brian Leach.
Brian Leach, yes. So I totally forgot about Brian Leach. Maybe a close second to the best Canadian hockey player to ever live is Connor McDavid, aside from Wayne Gretzky. They're not even on the same planet. That's probably the best we could give you is Liam hit it 100% correct, is that just the poor marketing. ESPN is the worldwide center of sports, and their best coverage to talk hockey is they don't count. They don't count.
You have
on the same network, on the same network where they host the Stanley Cup final. And they're competing with the NBA finals the same time of year. That's the difference.
You have the Boston Bruins, who are having a historical season, and you have the New York Rangers, who just acquired the greatest American-born player of all time, in addition to adding Vladimir Tarasenko a few weeks before that. And you know what they're talking about on ESPN? Aaron Rodgers, who's not even playing. So that really tells you all you need to know. I mean, the coverage of our favorite sport in the United States is subpar, like I said earlier. And Randy, just to go back to your point, just to circle back to the top here, hockey, Canada is the premier country for hockey. And I have no problem as an American saying that.
We can't fault ESPN for that coverage, because at the end of the day, it's a business decision. What drives the most viewership? Well, Aaron Rodgers.
Well, they just signed a deal. They just signed a broadcasting deal with the NHL.
You're 100% correct. But what drives the most viewers? Aaron Rodgers talking about him doing ayahuasca and going away on a darkness retreat for 4 days, or the Rangers acquiring Patrick Kane? What's the more driving of a story? It's going to be Aaron Rodgers, and that's why ESPN does those things. Kevin Durant is filled with drama. Kyrie Irving, filled with drama. Right? James Harden, filled with drama.
Right.
Hockey, there's no drama. So that's why ESPN just drives what they have.
And I definitely see your point, Will. And, I'll just end it on this. There was a reason why Stephen A. Smith needed to go on his cell phone later that night after that infamous segment with Michael Kay and said, I love the Rangers. The Rangers are great. So like there's a reason why he had to backtrack on his words. Clearly somebody from the NHL, I hope it was Gary Bettman, wasn't happy with the series of events that took place on the ESPN's coverage, of sports. And, they probably had some strong words, and Stephen A. Smith had to make a public apology via his cell phone later that night. That tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, no, it's a shame. It's obviously such an incredible skill level, but I do find it kind of funny where reporters are asking Patrick Kane, "Hey, Jalen Brunson is wearing your jersey. Does that make you feel good?" I mean, that is a story topic. That's a question you ask.
You're 100% correct, Randy. That is the epitome of hockey coverage in the United States. I'm sure you've seen it by now. The famous SNL skit, "Let's Do That Hockey," right? Where the guy couldn't pronounce Brady Shea's last name. So they pretty much made fun of hockey because who cares about hockey in the United States? Sports talk show, Boomer Esiason, who was a NFL great, played for the Bengals, played for the Jets. He's a diehard Ranger fan. His son-in-law is Matt Martin on the Islanders. He tries to talk hockey every day on his show. They immediately get shut down saying nobody cares about hockey. It's just a lack of poor coverage in the United States. Again, and I firmly believe it's because more people care about what's happening with John Morant, what's happening with the Mets, what's happening with Aaron Rodgers and ayahuasca, the darkness retreat, what's happening with Zach Wilson, hooking up with his friend's mom. I mean, that's the driving point here in the United States. It's true. I mean, this is what happens in the United States in sports. And I'll say it till the day I die, till blue in the face. The NFL has a ton of characters, but I'll never forget my time watching the Brooklyn Nets with those guys on the team, because that was a fun time to be a fan and say, wow, New York is being laughed at because of these three idiots who are on this basketball team. And that's why they get more coverage, because the NHL doesn't have that.
Well, I hope that'll change, but I completely agree with what you're saying, but I distinctly remember, and it just feels like that the gloves are off when players and coaches are talking to media during the playoffs. When Brandon Pruss was on the Canadiens, he called Sens coach Paul McLean a fat walrus, and why can't that dialogue happen throughout the regular season as well? I mean, there does seem to be a little bit they're loosening up a little bit, but I think safe to say, with due respect, that the NHL does have some work to do regardless.
Randy, just one more thing if I can.
Please,
and Liam can attest to this too. Liam, would you feel that hockey, the NHL here in the United States, gets publicity for the wrong reason? And I'm saying this because the most I've heard any show, any paper, any journalist, any publicist talk about the NHL is when Ivan Provorov or the Rangers decided to not wear the LGBT jerseys. And I think that hockey in the United States gets a bad rap for that. Liam, do you agree that maybe that's the most coverage we've seen, was that they're covering hockey and it's for the wrong reasons and not the right reasons?
I do agree with that.
Which gives hockey like a bad rap a little bit?
Yeah, I agree with that to a certain extent. And I think it's, controversial coverage. That's what's going to draw viewership. Of course, if Patrick Kane scores 2 goals in a game, guess what? Ivan Provorov not, showing up for Pride Night and not wearing the Pride jersey and refusing to wear it, that's going to be more important than Patrick Kane's 2-goal night at MSG. So I think you surmised it really well. And I think, again, just what Randy said, just hockey coverage in the United States has to be better, and the NHL has to do a better job at marketing its players. But I think if you asked any fan around the league, a majority of them would concur with my statement and all of our statements that the way that the NHL markets its players is not good enough. And I do agree with you that specifically in the United States, the majority of coverage that is put out there for the league is more negative than it is positive. Again, there is no more positive a storyline than Patrick Kane joining the New York Rangers. And they shrugged it off as it was nothing. So.
But I mean, take a look at the temperature and the tone during the Spitting Chicklets podcast. Now, I'm not saying that coverage should be as graphic as Paul Bissonnette. I mean, I think Biz Nasty is awesome, but I mean, he gets a little too much. Like, if you want to generalize me as someone who's woke, that's fine. Like, I don't, I think that it is better to be woke than a critic of woke. I mean, that's another topic altogether. But
I
mean,
agree with you. I agree.
yeah. But I mean, like, you take a look at the traditional conservative, stuffy approach of most hockey players. And then you go with Biz Nasty, and it's like, why? How come there isn't a medium
Right.
that hockey coverage and that the league can't figure out?
But that's exactly why TNT gave him the job on that panel as an analyst, because he has that personality. Trade deadline coverage here in the States, right? You probably saw it. They had Bo Horvat talk, and the first thing Biz Nasty could say to Bo Horvat is, your team is flat out boring to watch. It's boring hockey. You need to fix it. And that was cool because we never have people talk like that about the sport in this country. Liam's 100% right. Patrick Kane gets traded to the Rangers. They get one instant post. LeBron James breaks a scoring record. It's on every front page. It's a headline for weeks and months to come. It's 100% true. So people, like, you can hate him, you can love him, but it's the guys like Paul Bissonnette that are going to help this game grow because of his personality and the way he interacts with people on social media. It kind of drives the focus a little bit. Right?
Well, I'm sorry. I think one comment that does help as well was Lamoriello saying that Horvat's contract was for too long and for too much money. I thought it was gold. I mean, like, get a little personality. I mean, yeah, sure, he's taking a crack at his own player, but it was a joke, and
Right.
I'm not that woke where I should be saying that Lamoriello should apologize to his player. But I mean, that's no one had a gun to Lamoriello's head to sign that contract. So I mean, I think comments like that show a little color. Why not? Anyway, yeah. So, guys, I mean, we basically went half an hour, and we didn't get to the first topic. This is great. I mean, hey, why not have a little conversation while we're doing a podcast, right, guys? But no, that was a great start. And hey, why don't we get to what happened on Broadway? And we will start with Vladimir Tarasenko. Like I said in the beginning, that he won a cup with St. Louis. He spent his entire career there. He is not having the greatest of seasons to start. Will, how much does Tarasenko will be, and as a help to the Rangers?
I think Tarasenko was a big ad for the Rangers, and I think getting Tarasenko signaled for a lot of people that they were out on Patrick Kane. And I think the Rangers thought that too. I think that when they asked for Kane, the price was simply too high. That's why they didn't take any offers on him. But Vladimir Tarasenko is a proven goal scorer in this league. He's proven it his entire career. I wanted Tarasenko and the Islanders for a couple of years now, and he's in the middle of the issue with him is he can't seem to stay healthy. But when he's healthy, he's one of the best goal scorers the game has seen in a very long time. And I think playing with guys like Mika Zibanejad and Artemi Panarin are going to drive his game and elevate his game to another level. And that's no disrespect to Ryan O'Reilly, no disrespect to, his teammates in St. Louis, but the Rangers have a very prolific offense now, probably the best Tarasenko has been a part. And I think what the Rangers should do is separate Kane and Panarin, and you have Panarin and Tarasenko, because I think Panarin is a pass-first player. Tarasenko is a shoot-first player. And Liam can attest to this. The two games we've seen of Kane and Panarin together, they're trying to pass the puck to each other, and they're creating turnovers. So I think the best case for the Rangers is having Panarin with Tarasenko on that first line.
Yeah, and I'll touch on sorry, Randy. I'll touch on the Tarasenko trade here real quick as well. I think the fact that the Rangers are able to get a player who has scored 40 goals in his career, he is 2 years removed from a 34-goal, 48-assist season, 82 points. Of course, he has the injury history, as Will pointed to during his take. And of course, he had shoulder surgery in the past, I believe. And, he's not having the best season with the St. Louis Blues prior to getting traded. But if you look at what the Rangers gave up in this trade, it really wasn't a lot. Of course, you surrender a first-round pick and Hunter Skinner. And, of course, being a broadcaster in ECHL, I've watched Hunter Skinner a lot. He's a decent defensive prospect, and it's good for St. Louis that they're adding, some more players into their farm system. But for the Rangers, you add a superstar winger to play alongside Mika Zibanejad. And, Will, I'm going to go against you real quick here. I think Tarasenko is best with Zibanejad and Kreider on the first line, and you cannot split up Artemi Panarin and Patrick Kane. It's the best winger-to-winger combination that we've seen in the NHL in arguably the last 20 years. And I'd love to know both of your points on what I just said. But the fact that the Rangers also get Nico Mikkola as well, a depth defenseman who provides some size, a really good skater for somebody as tall as Nico Mikkola is. I think it was a home run of a trade. I think Tarasenko is finally getting adjusted, going from the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference. And you've seen in the last couple of games, his offensive scoring touch has really amped up a notch here. Of course, scoring that one-handed goal on Cam Talbot at MSG the other night. So good trade for the Rangers. Good trade.
Well, I mean, you talk about adding one superstar, but hey, why don't we talk about the other superstar that's headed to Broadway? And that, of course, is Patrick Kane. It was probably the bigger storyline as trade deadline was approaching. Patrick Kane is a three-time Cup winner. And personally, I don't really recall instances where hockey players were hoping to go to one specific team. I mean, you take a look at a basketball sense. James Harden wanted to go to Brooklyn. Carmelo Anthony wanted to go to New York. Lonzo Ball wanted to go to the Lakers, or maybe I should have said his pops LeVar. But Patrick Kane is a New York Ranger now. And Liam, I mean, can you explain why Kane and why New York? Why not another team?
I think Patrick Kane wanted to be reunited with Artemi Panarin. I think Kane realized that the last time where he had a line mate that was adequate enough to work well off of him and, subsequently allow him to provide some opportunities on the other side was with Artemi Panarin. And unfortunately, their time in Chicago was cut short, which is something that was really disappointing for me at the time when Chicago decided to trade him to Columbus for Brandon Saad 1-for-1. I understood why Chicago made the deal. They wanted to get the band back together, but Artemi Panarin was a superstar. And Randy, going back to your point that you just made, the moment that Patrick Kane came out and said that he was disappointed to hear that the Rangers acquired Vladimir Tarasenko, in that moment, he became a New York Ranger because he went to the Chicago Blackhawks, and the Blackhawks front office, they knew that if they did not trade this player at the deadline, he was going to walk as an unrestricted free agent for nothing. And even if he didn't walk as an unrestricted free agent for nothing and you re-signed him, yeah, you're bringing Patrick Kane back for multiple years, but he's not going to inch you any closer to a Stanley Cup, and he's going to inhibit your ability to rebuild and retool this team because Patrick Kane, as poor as his defensive numbers and maybe offensively he's been in this season, he makes your team better. And I don't really think at this point the Blackhawks want to get better, at least, right now. I think they want to accumulate draft capital. They want to get younger, and trading away Patrick Kane helps them do that. But I really think it was Patrick Kane going to the front office and saying, I don't want to go anywhere else but New York. And Chicago had to accept whatever the best deal the Rangers were able to give them. And that's why Patrick Kane was acquired for such an underwhelming return. But I think Blackhawks fans, they understood Kane's where he wants to be alongside Artemi Panarin. But let's not also underestimate how hard of a choice this must have been for Patrick Kane. I mean, we don't see oftentimes a player going home, away from a road trip with the team to just settle down his thoughts. And I really think that there was a decision made by Patrick Kane here. I think if he was going to get moved, he wanted to go to the Rangers. But I think the if in that last sentence is the really important part. I don't know if it was a clear-cut conclusion from the very start, at least of the trade deadline talks when things started to heat up, that Patrick Kane wanted to leave. But I think it was the team doing right by the player and Patrick Kane going to the only other place he would want to play hockey, and that is the New York Rangers. And to end my point, I think that Patrick Kane is only going to play for two teams in his NHL career, the Rangers and the Blackhawks. I think when he goes to unrestricted free agency, somehow the Rangers figure out how to keep him around or the Blackhawks re-sign him. I don't think he plays anywhere else. And I think this trade deadline shows you that.
Well, the fact is that Patrick Kane is a 34-year-old veteran, and he's a surefire Hall of Famer. You guys have already declared that Patrick Kane, if he's not one of the best American-born players in the NHL, he is the best player to come out of the United States. But, Will, I mean, is it possible to get caught up in the romance of what players have done in the past? I mean, yes, Patrick Kane has won 3 cups. However, he's still a 34-year-old man.
Yeah, you're 100% right to that. And I'm sure that, that went into the Blackhawks' decision on whether to keep Patrick Kane. And I'm sure the Rangers thought about that long and hard. And all of a sudden, this wasn't a rebuild by the Rangers like the letter that Liam knows that they were talking about. This quickly became a retool on the fly. And now you have a young team, and you insert them with 2 veterans over the age of 31 in Tarasenko and Kane. And now your window is to win right now, which is totally okay. I'm an Islander fan, and we have guys in their 40s. So I know what it feels like to have a window like we need to win right now. And you're 100% correct, and I think Liam said it well. He's not great defensively, and you saw that yesterday in the game against the Bruins, and that's going to happen. That's going to happen. But when he scores, there's no when he scores, there's no doubt he's arguably one of the best right wingers in the game when healthy and when producing at that high level. But for some reason, looking at highlights, looking at his season this year, whether it was he didn't want to be in Chicago no more, whether the team was flat, I don't see the same Kane that I did 5 years ago, and that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. But I think when you watch the highlights back to the guy who won 3 cups and scored the only goal in NHL history that only the goal scorer knew was scored and nobody else in the building, of course, the game in Philadelphia, he's not the same player that he was, and that's totally okay because even at 50%, he's still one of the best hockey players in the NHL.
I did think that was kind of a shame that it was so anticlimactic, that overtime winning goal. I mean, Blackhawks hadn't won the cup in so many years, and the only person that knew that he scored was Patrick Kane himself. But anyway, we digress. I mean, hey, it's been a long time since the Rangers won a cup. I mean, closer to my part of the world, it's been a long time since the Toronto Maple Leafs won a playoff series, let alone the Stanley Cup. It's been, 19 years, 2004, I think, since the Maple Leafs made it to the second round. And they're making some noise this trade deadline, fellas. I mean, they picked up the likes of Luke Shen, Jake McCabe, and, of course, they picked up Noel Acciari as well as Ryan O'Reilly as well. Will, there's a number of names have been dealt to Toronto. I mean, do you think it moves the needle at all?
Well, here's what I was going to say. And I think Kyle Dubas realized another year, first-round exit, I'm gone, and so is Sheldon Keefe. And I think they would have to start considering breaking down this core, right? The core that everybody had winning the Stanley Cup the day John Tavares signed, of Marner, Nylander, Tavares, Matthews, Morgan Riley, Freddie Anderson. It wasn't going to work anymore. So they parted ways with Freddie Anderson. They parted away with a few other pieces there. And now they have a brand new, I want to say, center depth, right? Where you have Tavares and Matthews. And now your bottom 6 is going to be Ryan O'Reilly. And is it Kerfoot? Kerfoot's in their 4th line center, right? Kerfoot and O'Reilly, is that their bottom 6 now?
They have Aston Reese there. They have
Aston Reese, yeah. So
David Kampf.
So they have a lot. They have a lot of options there. But the thorn in the Lightning side, the Maple Leaf side, is the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they continue to find third-line players who grind opponents down. We saw it last year with Nick Paul. Now they get Tanner Jeannot. They had Yanni Gourde. They had Blake Coleman and Andre Palat. They let these guys leave. They replenished their bottom 6 like nobody has ever seen. But, Randy, do you think what they're doing now is enough to beat the Lightning? I want to say yes, but the only problem I have is the goaltending. Matt Murray, Andrei Vasilevsky. We all know what's happening. Game 7, there's going to be a goal that Matt Murray wants to have back, and it's going to be the story all over again.
You think it's going to be Murray?
Sadly. But Liam knows I don't like the Leafs, but I do like their chances in round one. I really do. I think they got a lot better defensively, bringing in O'Reilly. They are very deep at defense now. Very deep. Eric Gustafsson, believe it or not, leads their D-men in points. Not Morgan Riley. Eric Gustafsson. That shows you how deep they are at defense.
Well, I mean, respectfully, and maybe it's just the cynical, pessimistic Leaf fan in me, but I think that they'll win because, and it appears that the Leafs and the Tampa Bay Lightning will be playing in the first round. I think that one of the reasons why they'll win is because Tampa's played so much hockey over the past 3 years. I mean, I am not confident. Who can be confident in Matt Murray and Samsonov, and they got Jacob Hall, and I mean, who are these guys? In the end, Ryan O'Reilly, he had a magical run with St. Louis in winning the cup, but the truth of the matter is that the core being Matthews, Marner, Morgan Riley, it's been 7 years and it's been crickets after the first round. Now, they did go to a bunch of game sevens. How many game sevens with this core? I think, 2 with the Bruins. They had 1 with the Canadians. Canadians were just, they just had everything going in the, they just found lightning in a bottle. But then they, had 7, went 7 against Tampa. Of course, they did a Buffalo Bills and just couldn't come up clutch in the end. They do have a strong side. And, I mean, to add to it, if they lose again, is it going to be to another cup finalist? Because that's what happened when they lost in game 7 to Boston, to Montreal, to Tampa. And I don't know if that's a reason why you should gas someone like Kyle Dubas. I don't know if that's a reason why you should cancel out Sheldon Keefe, because in the end, they're losing to teams who continuously win playoff rounds.
Randy, I agree with what you're saying, but it's a result-driven business. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you're losing to. The end of the day is you're losing. But I totally agree that the teams that they have lost to certainly matters. And of course, they lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning last year in a hard-fought 7-game series. And like you said, they weren't able to come up clutch. But I really, from a Rangers fan's perspective, love what Kyle Dubas did at this year's trade deadline. Noel Acciari, such a good bottom 6 player. He is a playoff type performer, exactly what they need. Sam Lafferty has been excellent in the bottom 6 this season for the Chicago Blackhawks. I imagine that will translate well. Ryan O'Reilly, what a grinder Ryan O'Reilly is. Look at that 2019 Stanley Cup final. I mean, my goodness. People forget, just because he's had a couple of down years with a St. Louis team that has been on the downturn, just how impactful of a player Ryan O'Reilly is in all 3 zones when he's on. If the Maple Leafs get the Ryan O'Reilly from earlier this season with St. Louis, the one that isn't producing, okay, you know what? You chalk that up as a loss. It's the play, he just maybe is over the hill a little bit. But you know what? I would beg to say that the Maple Leafs are going to get the Ryan O'Reilly of old. And I'm saying of old, even though the Ryan O'Reilly of a couple of years ago is exactly what they need. And Randy, if you look at their defense, I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, TJ Brody, Mark Giordano, Eric Gustafsson, what a trade that was by Kyle Dubas. That might be one of the top 5 trades that Kyle Dubas has made, trading away Rasmus Sandin to the Washington Capitals. And I know it's probably controversial in Toronto circles, but you get back Eric Gustafsson, who has produced a lot of points on the back end, as Will alluded to during his take, and a first-round pick. Randy, I'd love to know your answer to this question. Will, you as well? Right now, if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs or just a playoff contender, who would you rather have on your back end? Eric Gustafsson or Rasmus Sandin? I'm taking Eric Gustafsson all day.
Yeah, I mean, I would take Gustafsson for sure. And I mean, a lot of people were, getting critical of Sandin. I mean, it took him a while to sign. He wasn't really having that season that people were expecting. Gustafsson had this history. So yeah, sure. Between the two, it's Gustafsson without a doubt. I mean, that being said, it's just where does playoff experience factor in here? And I mean, yeah, maybe the Leafs do have playoff experience. They just don't have a winning culture here. Does that make a difference?
It does make a difference for sure. But again, I think that Kyle Dubas has done all he could with the roster that he has and the situation that he has to try and change the culture from being the way it is and the way it's been in past years to a winning culture, like you said. And I will echo Will's point to end my take on the Maple Leafs here. If they are going to lose in the first round to the Tampa Bay Lightning, there's one reason, and it's who's in net. And I don't think it's going to be Matt Murray. I think it's going to be Ilya Samsonov. So again, we'll see how they perform going down the stretch here. They're going to have a lot of difficulty with the Tampa Bay Lightning, of course, 3 straight Stanley Cup final appearances. But if I had to make a prediction right now on March 5th, I do think that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to win a round. I don't think they're going to get to the Cup final. I think they're going to get stopped by one of the Eastern Conference powerhouses, whether that's the Rangers, the Hurricanes, the Devils, or the Bruins. But I do think that they'll get past round 1. I think, as you said, Randy, Tampa Bay's played a ton of hockey over the last few years, and this Maple Leafs roster is ready. And Sheldon Keefe is a good coach, too. I like Keefe a lot.
I have to agree with Liam, just briefly. I think, when push comes to shove, like you asked me today, who's going to win in a 7-game series? I'm going to take, the Maple Leafs. However, you ask me a month from now, that may change. I'm taking the Leafs right now because you see John Cooper making a statement last night by benching Kucherov, Stamkos, and Point because they weren't producing. It's because they're gassed. They went to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. They don't have a summer. They don't have an offseason. It's just back on the grind. So you ask me today, I'm taking Toronto. You ask me a month from now, my answer could change. But I think the Maple Leafs could win the series. And again, it's going to come down to the goalie. But again, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, talking a little hockey with Liam Gotimer and Will Pesek. And guys, if we could continue with hockey, and of course, down the street from me is the Ottawa Senators. And it was a pretty emotional debut, home debut for Jakob Chychrun. He scored a goal and an assist in front of his new hometown crowd. His grandfather is an Ottawa resident, and he was in the stands for Game 1 of Jakob Chychrun's home career with his new team. Liam, I mean, don't count out the Sens. They're winners of 5 straight. Not a lot of people were expecting Ottawa to make a run like this. Now they picked up Jakob Chychrun as like a solid and sought-after piece, leading up to trade deadline day. How surprised were you about Chychrun going to Ottawa?
I wasn't really surprised, to be honest. I thought that Ottawa was one of the teams that had noted interest for a while. And of course, they're always looking for help on the back end. And they need a number 1 defenseman to play alongside Thomas Chabot. And Jakob Chychrun, Arizona really fumbled the bag with that entire situation. I think they held him out way too long. I think they were way too stingy. I mean, why didn't Arizona want to retain cap on Jakob Chychrun? I mean, they're retaining cap all over the place. I mean, in order to get yourself a better return, why wouldn't you do that? I mean, I think that to be the reason why they took a deal that included less prospects, less draft capital by the Ottawa Senators, I think was a little ridiculous. I didn't like that move on Arizona's part, but for the Senators, they jump in on a situation that they saw that they could take advantage of, and they did. And they're 32, 26, and 4. They're probably one of the more disappointing teams at the beginning of the season because, of course, they have the awesome offseason where they bring in Claude Giroux and they bring in Cam Talbot in goal, and they have all these young prospects, your Shane Pintos, your Jacob Bernard-Dockers, your Josh Norris, who I think is the most underrated player in hockey. But again, I digress. But the Senators find themselves 3 points behind the Pittsburgh Penguins and 4 points behind the Islanders. Ottawa, they have played the same number of games as Pittsburgh at 62, and they played 3 less games than the Islanders, only trail them by 4 points. Now, what do I talk about with games in hand? You need to win the games in hand for them to matter. But the Senators, they look locked and loaded to sneak into a playoff series here. And if they sneak into that second spot and end up facing Boston, I won't sit here and say that they'll beat them because they won't, but they'll give them some trouble. They might push them to 6 games. So I like what the Senators are doing. They are building to creating sustainable success. And I'm excited to see what they're able to do going into the offseason here. But good for them. I'm happy that they're pushing towards the playoffs. And they got Jakob Chychrun I believe Jacob Chychrun's being paid $4.5 million for the next few seasons. That's the best contract of any defenseman in the NHL. That's a win. That is a win.
Liam, I think you asked why the Senators didn't want to retain salary. I'm going to say it's because he was a disgruntled player. Everybody knew he wanted out for the past 3 seasons. The team was not going anywhere. And I think the biggest fumble was them and the Blue Jackets keeping Gavrikov and Chychrun out of the lineup and no trade being imminent. To me, that is absolutely NBA-like, and I don't like it. The players don't like it. Players want to play. Players want to practice. And you getting told, we're going to hold you out for trade-related reasons. Well, a trade better be close. It better be close, not 3 weeks later like the Senators did with Jacob Chychrun. And you know what happened? Their trade stock went down the toilet. If he played, they could have gotten a ton back for him. But because he was not playing, nobody knew why he didn't want to be traded. They had no choice but to trade him. They got a crappy return for him. The Canucks got more. So the Red Wings got more for Philip Hronek. The Predators got more for Tanner Jeannot than the Coyotes got for Jacob Chychrun, who could be a future
Norris Trophy
winner. Yeah. Right. So
I don't know, Will. Respectfully, I'm wondering if Arizona made the right move. Now, I don't like it either, but injuries, as we all know, can happen and can completely sewer the team even further. I don't know if I'm convinced that Chychrun's value went down because Arizona benched him.
I think it's more because they weren't willing to retain. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I think a part of it is because you're sitting here now as you're the Coyotes, and teams are calling it on Jacob Chychrun, and they're saying, what do you want for him? And what do they want? 2 first-round picks and a prospect? And I think they could have gotten that if they just played him a little bit more. He wasn't even practicing. They wouldn't let him practice.
Yeah,
it's a whole fumble by that entire organization. They're still paying Andrew Ladd. They're paying Pavel Datsyuk, and they would not pick up $2 million to pay Jacob Chychrun. At that point, you're asking yourself why. I think it was because he was disgruntled. And I think, all kidding aside, I think that could have driven his trade value down. When you look at a team like the Washington Capitals, why do we want to give you 2 first-round picks to a guy who might want to demand a trade out of our team? I think that has something to do with it as well.
Yeah. Honestly, and we were talking before we went to air here, and the Coyotes are going to be going to Arena in Tempe. They do have something going on. And the question is, I've always wondered if Gary Bettman is making the right move staying in Arizona, the Phoenix area, because it's taken a long time for the Nashville Predators to get going. And now Smashville, you take a look at that Yellow Sea during playoff time. You look at Carolina, like the whole storm surge, which hockey purists absolutely hated. And now Carolina is a really hot ticket. And,
Randy, if I can just jump in real quick to your point about Nashville. I've been to Nashville once in my life. That was last year in the summer, and I want to go back. There was no hockey played. They got swept, 4 games to Colorado. Every single person there, the day I was there, waited online for season tickets because the atmosphere there is through the roof.
Well, hold on. Let me jump in here because I was in Nashville in December. I was there for a trade show, and unfortunately, the Preds were playing in the afternoon during that show. They were playing Ottawa, I believe, and my director and I were big hockey fans. Couldn't go to the game. After the game lets out, and we're having dinner right by Bridgestone Arena, and there is a sea of people in Predators gear. It's beautiful to see.
Yeah, it is, and you might not see that in Arizona. I don't think you will. I think Arizona has kind of like the Atlanta Thrashers, right?
Well, but that's what I'm saying. Get a couple of playoff wins in there. what could happen, right? Like, I mean, is there going to be more of an interest? Because Arizona has sucked since they've been in the league.
And it's also not like where you're located too. And I've never been to Arizona. I bet it's beautiful down there. But Randy, you've been to Nashville. You've been to the Broadway Strip. You don't have to be a hockey fan to be like, this place is sick. There's bars on every corner you look at. It's a thriving atmosphere. The Tennessee Titans play literally a 2-minute walk down the road. Everything is where you need on Broadway there. That is a hockey atmosphere. You know what it is? A family of 4 comes down. They're in town on vacation in Nashville. Oh, there's a hockey game going on. Let's go. It's rowdy. It's raucous. It's a great environment. I don't know if Arizona really has that. I don't know if they have that there. But you know what city I do think has that? If they are looking to move, I'm going to say it's not Seattle because they just got a team, and it's not Atlanta. I think if they're going to bring a team back, bring it back to Hartford. Bring it back to Hartford.
Already got the Wolfpack, Will. What are you going to do with the Wolfpack?
I went to school in Connecticut for 4 years. They love hockey. They're Ranger Islander fans. They want their own team back. It might work.
For me, I think it's Quebec or Houston or Alpharetta.
You know, I mean, okay, let's look at this in a long-term sense. Okay, so to back up a minute, I was in Vegas and went to a Golden Knights game during their first season. It was against San Jose, absolutely raucous. It was such a great experience. The music, the in-game presentation, phenomenal. Personally, though, I wonder, and Will, I'm sure you're going to chime in. I wonder if Hartford is too small a community, because I think that's the problem in Quebec City. I mean, given the fact that it is predominantly French, like, I don't know if you guys have been to Montreal. They do have a split. There's a lot more bilingual people in Montreal, not the case in Quebec. Like back in the day when the Nordiques were in the league, like the PA was purely in French. Montreal, it's both languages. I'm kind of going outside the box. To me, Houston doesn't make sense. With the Rockets, with the Texans, college sports, I'm wondering Milwaukee, Portland especially with Vancouver and Seattle. I'm wondering Kansas City. I don't know about, and I mean, like a lot of people were thinking about a second NHL team in Toronto. I don't know if that's going to work either. A mature market like Toronto, which, by the way, I don't think is the hockey capital of the universe. It's the Maple Leaf capital of the universe. That's another story. But I mean, I'm wondering, because I mean, this is a community. If you're not a Leaf fan, you're going to be a Canadiens fan. You're a Bruins fan. Maybe you're a Rangers fan, Flyers. Who's going to cheer for a second team in Toronto? But I mean, like you have, with Kansas City, they're clamoring. They don't have an NBA team. Is it like those kind of communities? Will, I mean, you said Hartford, though. What are your thoughts with the other cities that I had mentioned, for example? Let alone with Houston, what Liam said.
You're not entirely wrong that the whole city of Hartford is just too small to expand the NHL, right? So it's coming to a point now. You look at where they're going to. Vegas, they're going to succeed wherever they go. It's Las Vegas. You're going to get tourists. They're going to go to hockey games. It's a big market. They just moved the Oakland Raiders to Vegas. They're trying to make an MLB expansion team to one of 2 cities, Vegas or Nashville, because those 2 cities drive the most people in. Vacations, they come, they go. Hartford will not work now that I'm hearing, your reasoning. Liam mentioned Houston.
Sorry,
Liam
please.
mentioned Houston. Liam mentioned Houston, and Houston intrigues me. But what concerns me about Houston is they will not be the primary market in Houston. It'll always be the Astros. Then it'll be the Houston Rockets. And same thing why the Rays and Marlins in baseball do not draw. Because if you are in Miami and you are in Tampa Bay and it's a July afternoon, you're not going to want to go to a baseball game. And if it's October, if it's November, April, you're not going to want to go to a hockey game in Houston. You want to see the Astros. You want to see the Rockets. I think there's a difference there. with what teams are on top. And I think Vegas was the first step to say to other sports leagues, we're going to drive viewership here. And that's why the Raiders followed suit. And Seattle followed suit when the Seahawks were there. And Seattle's worked out great. And if there's a market that I think could potentially fit, do they want any more Canadian teams, Randy? What city is big in Canada that does not have a current NHL team? Saskatchewan? Like, where could they potentially go?
I mean, let's take a look at Winnipeg, for example, because Winnipeg, it's a great experience. The team is doing really well, but it's a small market that is not very alluring in terms of free agency. It is a cold climate, and to me, the biggest market is Quebec City, but I mean, like, obviously the biggest market is Toronto, and the word is it has died down over the years, but I've just never been sold to the fact that the NHL could support two NHL teams in Toronto. I just never have. It's just, with all the millions of people that are here, I mean, you're not going to find it's not going to be a cheaper ticket, that second NHL team, to a Leaf ticket. And, I don't know New York City as, off the back of my hand, but, are you going to go travel halfway across from, say, I don't know, Brooklyn to deep Manhattan, or are you going to travel 20 miles to watch a second NHL team? In Toronto. I mean, traffic is what it is. I'm not willing to drive 40 miles for if the second NHL team plays, the Blue Jackets, for example. And respectfully, I mean, I think the rivalry will be intense. I mean, if a second NHL team comes to Toronto, I'm going to hate them more than the Canadians. But I just don't see it. I mean, in Quebec, I think there's going to be a honeymoon period, but I think they'll go back to the reason why the Nordic left, 25 years ago.
Randy, just really quick, I have to jump off in a second, but I want to say, first of all, thank you very much. This was an absolute blast. I lost track of time because we were having so much fun.
No, for sure.
Liam and I do a podcast, and I'm sure Liam will 100% agree with what I'm going to say. You are more than welcome to join us on our podcast.
No, absolutely.
100,000%. You're one of the people that we've stayed in touch with from Colorcast. We have a couple other people, but you have been fantastic. So before I go, I wanted to say thank you.
No, it's sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, Will. No, thank you so much. I really wanted to get you on, and unfortunately, it's a shame that you do have to leave, Liam. I hope you can stick around, but the broadcasting that you do is just you have a real skill, and the knowledge that you have. Let's do it again really soon, okay?
Thank you very much, Randy. Appreciate it. Liam,
get some sleep, man. I mean, get some sleep. You might be asked.
Go take a nap, bud. Come on.
I really, can't complain. It's a hard time waking up at 2:00 in the morning, and then I look at the clock and I'm like, man, it's 5 a.m. and I'm ready for a cheeseburger. I'm ready for a steak. And it's just like, so I'm gonna go get some rest. So thanks a lot for having me, and you're more than welcome on our show anytime. So
looking forward to it. Thanks so much.
See you, man.
Will Pesek, he's a producer for News 12 out of Hunter Valley out of New York. So Liam, it's just you and me now. And, I was wondering with regards to Jonathan Quick, I mean, he found a couple of new homes, and originally he was traded to the Blue Jackets, and now he is a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, in your observation, was this like a traditional 3-team trade? Did LA realize that he was eventually going to find his way to Vegas? That's why they shipped him to the worst team in the league.
I think it's an interesting concept. I mean, to answer your question, I would say it's not a traditional three-team trade. I just think it was LA getting Jonathan Quick off their books. And of course, in the last year of his contract, rather, it's very unfortunate that they would trade a franchise a goaltender that had led you to two Stanley Cup final victories in 2012 and 2014, and trade him to the Columbus Blue Jackets. But I think it's not a traditional three-team trade, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Kings had it in mind that once they moved him to Columbus, he would have been moved to a contender. Maybe not Vegas specifically, but had a chance to win a Stanley Cup. I don't think they would have wanted to trade him to a division rival outright. But the fact that they get Jonas Korpisalo and Vladislav Gavrikov, I think those are two nice pieces. I think the Kings were a starting goaltender away from really solidifying their roster heading towards the playoffs here. And people forget, Jonas Korpisalo, remember he had north of 80 saves, was it, against the Tampa Bay Lightning in that 5 overtime game?
I don't know about 80. I don't know about 80, but I think it was definitely over 70.
It's definitely over 70 saves. But yeah, Korpisalo, he is a good goaltender. He's proven that he's able to do it in the playoffs. The Kings get a top four defenseman alongside a starting goaltender. Of course, they ship out Jonathan Quick, but I'm happy that he found himself to Vegas and he has a chance to win a Stanley Cup alongside Logan Thompson.
Well, you were kind of alluding to the fact that you don't think that LA did Quick a dirty and send him to Columbus. But I mean, should have LA just look for their better interests? I mean, yes, Jonathan Quick did lead the Kings to two Stanley Cups. He's probably going to have some sort of ceremony regarding his number at some point. But in the end, LA is about results. And if they did find something in Columbus that was of value, I don't really fault them for that.
Yeah, I don't fault them too much, and I think the fan base was always going to be up in arms when you trade away somebody who has that much impact to the franchise as Jonathan Quick does. But at the end of the day, Jonathan Quick, it's a results-driven business. As good as he's been in the past, he's having one of the worst years statistically for any goaltender in the NHL, and they needed to upgrade the position because I think if the Kings headed into the playoffs, even in the relatively weak Western Conference with the tandem of Phoenix Copley and Jonathan Quick, they would have been ousted in the first round quickly. And as me and Will alluded to at the top of the show, teams want to go for it and they see a chance to win a Stanley Cup. And for the Kings, maybe not win a Stanley Cup, but they definitely see a chance to get out of the Western Conference, which, if you really evaluate the teams, I think they're towards the top of the list now with Jonas Korpisalo. So it's a good trade. They made their team better. Unfortunate that they had to do that to Jonathan Quick, but I agree with you. I don't blame them. They did a good team move there.
Yeah, he is Liam Gotimer. He is the Director of Broadcasting and Communications for the Atlanta Gladiators of the ECHL. I'm Randy Kure at What's Up the Sports podcast. And Liam, definitely wanted to get your thoughts on the Vancouver Canucks. And they have really fallen on some hard times. And you bring in a general manager such as Jim Rutherford, you have a proven coach in Bruce Boudreau, and the days leading up to Bruce Boudreau's firing was one of the more public displays that I think the both of us, as well as the hockey world, maybe even the sports world, has ever seen. We were talking about the Bo Horvat trade to Long Island. Have you seen anything that has taken place similar to what has been going on in Vancouver?
It's a rite of passage that whenever I'm on Zoom, I mute myself and start.
No, please. Yeah. No, it's a delay, but no, it's all good.
Yeah, but it's an absolute dumpster fire in Vancouver. And I think what happened with Bruce Boudreau, Randy, was something unlike anything I've ever seen as a hockey fan. And to come outwardly and say, as Jim Rutherford did, that there's going to be a coaching change behind the bench while Bruce Boudreau is still the head coach of the team is just really deplorable. really behavior as a general manager. So I really didn't like it. I'm happy for Bruce Boudreau that the fans were singing Bruce There It Is on multiple occasions, even going through a losing season as they are. They realized that Bruce Boudreau isn't the reason, and it's the way that their roster was constructed and some moves that were made in the offseason and just everything coming together to create the dumpster fire that is the 2023 season for the Vancouver Canucks. They've gotten better, since the trade deadline and after Bruce Boudreau, of course, got fired and Rick Tocchet comes in. But it really was a tough situation. I'm happy to see Bruce Boudreau. I believe he's back with TSN now. I believe in that hockey panel, he was pictured there. So good to see him back on TV. I hope he gets another head coaching job. And just the main point I want to make is the reason why the Canucks were having as much struggles as they were, especially early on in the season, does not fall solely on Bruce Boudreau. And I think Jim Rutherford was wrong in how he evaluated his group and subsequently his coaching staff. But I think Rick Tocchet's a good coach and he's better for what they need to improve upon. Rick Tocchet is a defensive-minded coach, and the Canucks defense had been pretty atrocious, at the beginning part of the year. So.
Well, and Liam, I do want to give a shout out to Jay Cardinale. He has been sending in a couple of tweets, and it took me a minute to actually recover those tweets. And amongst other things, he mentioned of how Jonathan Quick is a legend in LA. NHL is a business. Quick is cooked, according to Jake's opinion, and acknowledged the fact that two players were coming over to Columbus, and Jake agrees to the fact that the Bruce Boudreau saga was messed up. Anybody who does want to hop on for a couple of minutes, any questions that you may want to ask me or Liam, please feel free. This is What's Up the Sports podcast. And, Liam, I'm wondering if Vancouver should have done anything at all. The fact is that they are going through a really tough time. They do have the ability of drafting one of the greatest players potentially in Connor Bedard. Is it possible that, they are making a wrong move in, trying to salvage a season if they are in fact doing that, because they fired Boudreau, they get Rick Tocchet in? Why not just, maintain course and then hope for the best with regards to where they finish for the draft lottery?
Yeah, I just think that it's not wanting to accept where you are as a team. And I think the trade where they acquired Philip Roenick and traded away the first-round pick that they acquired from the Islanders. I mean, the Vancouver Canucks throughout their entire history, even when they have been trying to rebuild or retool, they have consistently traded away draft picks. And in a year where they need to accumulate young players and accumulate those picks, they trade away one that they received from their franchise player in what is a very, very deep 2023 draft. So I didn't understand that move for Roenick. And especially if you're going to make a trade for a top four defenseman, why aren't you going for Jacob Chychrun if they went for about the same asking price? Maybe Chychrun went for maybe a third or fourth round pick more than Roenick did. But, look, for the Canucks, just looking forward, I evaluated their team prior to the trade deadline, and I see pieces here. I don't see an entire rebuild. I see a number one center in Elias Pettersson. I see one of the best players to come over from the KHL in quite a while in Andrei Kuzmenko. He's in Vancouver. Not a lot of people like to talk about him in the United States, but he's been one of the most impactful forwards, on the Canucks this season. They have a number one defenseman in Quinn Hughes, and they have a number one goaltender. Even though he's having a bad year, I still have belief in Thatcher Demko. And thank goodness the Canucks didn't trade Demko, trade Pettersson, trade Quinn Hughes prematurely, because even though they're in a little bit of a tough spot as an organization, they have a solid head coach and they have foundational pieces at the positions that matter: center, defense, and goaltending.
Well, Liam, I'm guessing that Jay Cardinale. He was a Colorcast subscriber, just like myself. Your show was with Will. Jake, I know that you are on mute right now. Jake, how have you been, man? A fellow New Yorker with Liam here, a fellow Rangers fan. How have you been, my man?
I got something right now, so I figured I'd been on both your shows like you guys do. I know Liam, I know you got the gig with the ECHL team, which is I think is really cool. So I saw you guys were talking trade deadline. So we had a great trade deadline. So I want to talk about. I'm not sure if you probably did, because I know Liam's also a Rangers fan. But I want to talk about what the Rangers did. They made a couple moves I like. They made the move for Vladimir Tarasenko with St. Louis, and then they got the young defenseman Nicola in that deal too, and then they got Kane. They got that deal done. I thought they were good moves with Tarasenko. He's not the guy that's gonna, like he did the one time against the Rangers, weave through the entire defense and score this highlight reel goal. And he's not gonna score 30 goals anymore, but he's still a solid top six forward. And I think it makes the team better. You give up Scotty Black, he wasn't doing all that much this year. He wasn't even getting. He was out, he scratched. You have the one prospects and then the 2 draft picks, then the 1 first round. And for Kane, you just give up the 2 picks. It could be a first round, could be a second round, and then I think the 3rd or the 4th round. So Kane, similar to Tarasenko, is not the guy that's going to give you 30 goals and 90 points anymore, like he has been. He's obviously a little bit nicked up this year, but still, I think a solid top 6 forward. I think that definitely helps the Rangers.
Well, Jake, I did ask this to Liam as well as Will, and obviously Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane are Stanley Cup champions. But are they guys that are that fans and media are just reminded of their history, and in terms of the current, are they actually going to be a difference maker as for the New York Rangers? Do you think that those two especially are going to put the team over the hump and contend for a cup?
I think they're in that like tier with. I think the Boston Bruins, you could argue, are on a tier by themselves. I don't see anything that they don't. I don't see a single weakness on the hockey team. The Boston Bruins. I think the Rangers are at least in that conversation with, the New Jersey Devils and the Carolina Hurricanes. If you want to put Tampa in that conversation, because they've been to 3 straight cups, they've won 2 of them. In order for them not to be the favorite, you could argue someone just has to beat them, and no one's done it yet. Are they going to? On paper, they probably aren't as good as they were last year. They went to the finals last year for a reason. You just look at their 6. You have Marin, Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, Tarasenko, Kane, all in that top 6. They're not playing right now. Last year, he's been a little up and down this year. To start off, he wasn't as good. Then he kind of found his stride, but now these last 4 or 5 starts, he hasn't played great. Those last couple have been a little better. So I think if Igor can find himself towards the middle of the season, which was not that far off from last year. Last year, he stood on his head. He played out of his mind. I know in front of him, they have been fantastic. I love that first pairing of Fox and Lindgren. The second pairing, Trouba and Miller, has been okay. In the third pairing, they've kind of switched guys with Schneider, and now you pick up Cole. You got one big guy there. I think this is a very complete team. I think they could go probably as far as they did last year.
Yeah. Couple more before we do sign off here. And Liam, of course, we did go through a bunch of trades and so on. But was there a trade that jumped out at you that could be a real difference maker as leading up to the playoffs and during the run for the Cup?
Yeah, I think that there's one move that everyone's talking about and one move that not a lot of people are talking about. And I'll go for the obvious choice. And I think Timo Meier joining the New Jersey Devils, that is huge. And, I mentioned at the top of the show that I thought that Timo Meier was the most valuable trade deadline player that was available at this year's deadline. And the Devils get him. And, I went on previous podcasts before the Devils had acquired Meier, and I said, look, you don't think that Tom Fitzgerald, the general manager of the Devils, is looking around the tri-state area and seeing that the Rangers are on the precipice of acquiring Kane at the time, acquiring Tarasenko, the Islanders getting Bo Horvat. He realizes that there's pressure here, and he brings in Timo Meier, and he's been injured. I don't believe he's played a game with the Devils yet. He may have played one or two, but he's going to add a lot to that top six, and it's already a top six that is pretty lethal with Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier. Now, of course, Timo Meier gets to play alongside Hischier, his fellow countrymate, two very good two-way players. The Devils got a lot better at the deadline, and they did well by acquiring Timo Meier and not giving up any of their top-end prospects. You look at Luke Hughes, he stayed put. Simo Nemec, he stayed put. Alexander Holtz, same thing. They move on from Shakir Makumadulin, who was one of their top defensive prospects, a former first-round pick. But if you look at the broader, bigger picture of how much the Devils gave up to get Timo Meier, it really wasn't a lot. And if they can have some playoff success and subsequently re-sign the player, that's a move I definitely look towards. And an underrated trade that I feel like not a lot of people are talking about. The Winnipeg Jets needed to make changes at this year's deadline. Had a great season, having a great season, but this recent stretch has been pretty bad. And they acquire Nino Niederreiter, who's one of the best two-way forwards, in the league, at least that's stapled in the bottom six. And he comes over from the Nashville Predators. A second-round pick goes in exchange for the player. But I just look at what Nashville has done as a whole and Winnipeg bringing in Niederreiter. I think that's a nice trade for them. And I also don't want to move on from this discussion without talking about Mattias Ekholm and how he goes to the Edmonton Oilers. That's a really nice pickup for Edmonton as well. I think Ken Holland realized not to go for the big fish, not to go for Erik Karlsson, not to take on that huge contract and have to give up the picks and prospects to make the money work. And instead, he just trades out Tyson Barrie, which is a tough loss. Tyson Barrie is one of the biggest reasons why their power play is as lethal as it is. He is an excellent power play quarterback. But what the Edmonton Oilers needed was defensive defensemen, and it doesn't get a lot better than Mattias Ekholm in this league. So again, if their goaltending can stand up, and Randy, I know you know a lot about Jack Campbell, I think that they'll have a nice playoff run as well. So a couple of moves I liked around the trade deadline.
Well, and I do recall the interview that Tyson Barrie gave after he was traded, and you just really feel for the guy because, he was having a. You thought that he was going to be a piece for that Edmonton run, and that when you get shipped out, that definitely is a kick to the ego. But I mean, obviously, with having the best player currently in the NHL not making a cup run yet, of course, being Connor McDavid, is Jack Campbell going to lead the charge? I mean, because Stuart Skinner is having a better year, and that Campbell really hasn't had a fit. But in the end, to Liam, and if you're still around, is this all for naught? Are we seeing one of the greatest seasons that have taken place in recent memory? That, of course, being the Boston Bruins. I mean, they picked up Dmitry Orlov. They picked up Garnet Hathaway. They have not lost 10 games yet. They're just completely killing it. And a lot of people are just putting them as a surefire contenders. Liam, start with you, and Jake, if you're on as well. I mean, is there a sole person that you think is more crucial for Boston to succeed and to win this season?
Is there a person more crucial, like Pastrnak you're talking about? Or
is there one person, or is it just pretty much a complete team effort? Is there one person, whether it's Pastrnak, whether it's Marchand, whether it's Ullmark, is there one person that needs to have a strong run in the playoffs for Boston?
It's a good question. And I think it is going to be entirely a team effort. But if you want to circle one player, and I'll circle two players, I think Linus Ullmark is number one. I mean, the statistics that Linus Ullmark is putting up this season is absolutely ridiculous. He's the runaway winner of the Vezina Trophy, and he was coming off a time in Buffalo prior to when he signed the contract with the Bruins, where he wasn't necessarily great, didn't really stand out as the number one goaltender. The Bruins take a chance on Ullmark, and the combination of Ullmark and Swayman. I mean, we could talk about Ullmark and his Vezina Trophy winning season. But Jeremy Swayman's been a really nice compliment to him. And alongside the goaltending tandem, for me, Randy, who really stands out, Hampus Lindholm. Nobody's talking about Hampus Lindholm. I mean, man, what a season he's having. He is a number one defenseman for this Bruins team. I think he's more impactful for this Bruins team on the back end than Charlie McAvoy is. That's how good Hampus Lindholm has been this season. But with that said, I do think that there's a lot to saying that is going to be a team effort that's going to push them through the playoffs. I mean, Randy, if you just look at their depth chart, Patrice Bergeron comes back for 1 year. He looks like the player that he's been during his entire tenure with the Bruins, one of the most important players to their team. David Krejci comes back from overseas. That's a huge addition. You have depth centers like Charlie Coyle, Tomas Nosek, Brad Marchand, Pavel Zacha coming over in a 1-for-1 trade for Eric Haula in the offseason. That's been a win for the Bruins. Haula's been decent for the Devils, but Zacha has really blossomed into the player New Jersey wanted him to become. They also acquired Tyler Bertuzzi from the Detroit Red Wings. And of course, Bertuzzi, and with his controversy, of course, not getting vaccinated, at least in the beginning, and I believe he might have or might not. But again, that doesn't matter. We're talking about what's going on the ice. Bertuzzi is an impact player, and Bertuzzi is somebody who likes to grind and get into the dirty areas. And if you're pairing him up right now with Charlie Coyle, a player that likes to play the same way, I think that's going to be a really nice addition for them. Jake DeBrusk. Remember there was a time, Randy, when Jake DeBrusk wanted his way out of Boston, playing under Bruce Cassidy, and exactly when the coaching change is made and Jim Montgomery comes in. Look at Jake DeBrusk. He's a top 6 forward, a solidified top 6 forward. David Pastrnak, he just signed his $11.5 million per season extension. You know, we could talk for days about how elite Pastrnak is, but you look at these bottom 6 players. Trent Frederick, who I really like, a former first-round pick. Talk about a guy who plays with grit. Garnet Hathaway, who they acquire from the Washington Capitals. Hathaway is one of the best bottom 6 players in the league. Dmitry Orlov comes in. He's going to pair right up with Charlie McAvoy, and Brandon Carlo with Hampus Lindholm. That's a solid top 4, and you have more depth defensemen in Derek Forbort, Matt Grzelcyk, Connor Clifton, Jacob Zaboral. So this is just an elite roster. It's a special season. Jim Montgomery getting over his alcohol issues, returning to the NHL. I'm really happy for him behind the bench. But with that said, I'll end it with this, Randy. They got 103 points through 62 games. They're 1 win away from a 50-win season. They're going to win the President's Trophy. That's all I got to say. So well, how President's Trophy winners do in the playoffs.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do President's Trophy winners win the Stanley Cup. I mean, there has been a history of that team being snake bit. I mean, very quickly before I ask you who you think is going to win, how do you think Alexander Ovechkin is feeling these days? The fact that it does seem that the Caps are, in a state of transition right now.
It's tough, and if I recall correctly, I believe Alexander Ovechkin extended with the Capitals for, what was it, 5 years or 3 to 5 years this past offseason when he became an unrestricted free agent. And I bet he didn't foresee a retool or a rebuild or whatever the Capitals front office wants to call the moves that they're making. I think that they want to turn it around. They want to get better, but they also want to get younger. I mean, Randy, if you look at prior to this trade deadline, the worst prospect pool in the entire NHL, I believe, belonged to the Washington Capitals. Their top prospect is Connor McMichael, and they have Hendrix Lapierre as well. Those are 2 players in Hershey in the American Hockey League who aren't performing too well. So they really needed to replenish their system. So for me, Randy, it comes down to the Capitals not wanting to win a Stanley Cup for the next few years. Of course, you want to win a Stanley Cup, but they see where their roster is at, and now it's just all about the chase for Ovechkin getting to 895 goals.
Yeah, and if they are going to make a splash in the offseason with free agency, that remains to be seen. Who's going to win the Cup?
Who's going to win the Stanley Cup? Put me on the spot, huh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, first, let's go into the Western Conference just to see who's going to come out. Again, we talked about how weak the Western Conference is. For me and Randy, I'd love to know your thoughts before I give away my Eastern Conference winner. I think it's going to be the Colorado Avalanche. I think they're the best team in the Western Conference. I think
they're going to repeat, huh?
I think that they're going to repeat, at least getting to the Stanley Cup final. I mean, look at all the other teams, just real quick. Minnesota, they were selling off parts. I don't really trust their goaltending. I think Marc-Andre Fleury is a little bit over the hill. Winnipeg has struggled so much down the stretch here. Nashville and St. Louis, they're not even in the conversation. Vegas, I could see Vegas making a run, but, just more to be wanted from the Vegas Golden Knights for me. And of course, they're going to be without Mark Stone, who underwent back surgery. We don't know how that's going to impact their roster heading towards the playoffs. The Kings, I don't like their goaltending enough. We just mentioned Jonas Korpisalo, who had his 85 save performance in the bubble in 2020 in the 5 overtime game against the Lightning. I still don't think that gets you to a Stanley Cup final. The Seattle Kraken, I still think, are too young of a team. So for me, it's either Edmonton or Colorado. And I'm not taking Edmonton, so I'm taking Colorado.
Well, I mean, Colorado right now are sitting 8th in the West. And I mean, like you mentioned before, Winnipeg's been sputtering. I mean, how many people are taking Dallas seriously? I mean, you think of Ottinger, you think of who they do have. Again, is it all for naught? But I mean, like with Vegas. I guess solidifying their their net, quick, being a backup potentially. Like, is Vegas going to perhaps make a return to the Cup final? In the end, I mean, just the fact that Boston is essentially lapped the field at this point. I mean, you're just taking a flyer on somebody else. That's the way I see it. I mean, maybe the regular season doesn't mean anything. I mean, we can recall the bubble year, or sorry, was it the bubble year? No, it wasn't. But Tampa was the President Trophy champion. They lose to 8th place Columbus, and I mean, there's no reason why you can't pick Boston. Who's going to join them in the West? I mean, that's going to be another flyer too. Something says Vegas to me.
Something says Vegas.
Yeah, I think it's Boston over Vegas in the final.
Okay, I like that for sure. And I don't want to take anything away from Vegas, but just the uncertainty of Stone's injury. Their depth is a little bit different. Jack Eichel, I don't know necessarily if he's the same player that he was prior to his neck surgery. I mean, of course, he's still elite. He's still a top end center in this league, but I just don't know how well it's worked in Vegas. For me, I just mentioned that Boston and the President's Trophy is a little bit of a jinx, so I can't go with Boston. I think they're going to get knocked out in round 2. I think they'll win a round, but I think that they'll get knocked out in round 2. Randy, I think the Eastern Conference Final is going to be the Rangers against the Maple Leafs.
Oh God, are you kidding? I mean, that's. I mean, I love you. I love you for that to include my team with yours, but I don't know. I'm just too cynical. I'm sorry. I mean, my father emigrated to Canada. I love mentioning this point. My father emigrated to Canada in 1969, and him and I have seen the same number of Cup appearances in the final for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I, of course, is 0. So I mean, obviously, not making it past the first round in close to 20 years. Tampa being who they are. I mean, yeah, sure, they're tired, but I mean, for some reason, I'd be more comfortable if the Leafs were playing Carolina. Maybe it's just a superficial surface thing. I mean, Carolina doesn't. I mean, they've had a strong year, obviously, but do they have that history, that track record? I don't know. If New York makes the conference final, I think you got another dance partner. Sorry.
All right. Well, I'm going to stick to my prediction here. I think it's going to be Rangers Leafs in the Eastern Conference Final. I think the Rangers are going to win, so I think you're going to go another year without seeing the Leafs in the Stanley Cup Final. And as far as who wins, I don't want to predict my team to lose, but I think that the Rangers in Colorado would be a great series, and I'd be excited to see it. But yeah, look, and as far as the Maple Leafs are concerned and about getting over that hump against Tampa Bay, I mean, look, this roster that Kyle Dubas is putting out there for the postseason run and the rest of the regular season, it's far better than the roster that suited up for Game 7 in Toronto against the Lightning. And you know what? I would argue that you have a better goaltender in net too. I mean, I'll ask you, would you rather have Jack Campbell in a Game 7 or Ilya Samsonov in a Game 7?
I mean, it's riddled with hindsight, but the reality is that Jack Campbell, in my opinion, wasn't really the reason why Toronto lost last year. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like he went to Edmonton, and I don't know, maybe like I notice how self-deprecating he is, and I don't know if that's a fault, but he I think puts a lot of the onus on himself. And I don't think he has that kind of mental toughness. I mean, with the season that he's having in Edmonton, with Samsonov having the season that he's having now, between the two, yeah, I'd probably say Samsonov. But again, I think it's just as a result of this year. If this was last year, Samsonov being in Washington, of course, I would have been comfortable with Jack Campbell in net. I mean, he came out like gangbusters in the first half of last year, and then he sputtered, and then he was, he wasn't, as mentioned, the issue in last year's playoffs to Tampa. So, which Jack Campbell are you going to get?
Yeah, and again, hindsight is 2020, as we both spoke about. But my point is, I think that this roster is more equipped to take down the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Lightning have proven that they're, not. Of course, an impressive record, 37-20-5, 79 points, a .637 winning percentage. That's nothing to sneeze at. But just something is off for me about this Tampa Bay team. John Cooper benched Kucherov, Stamkos, and Point during the entire third period last night, came out with a harsh statement after the game. I don't know. I think Cooper's one of the best coaches in the league, but I think there might be a little bit of a disconnect there. Again, they're a tired group. I just like the Leafs' chances, and I'd be interested to revisit this conversation after the first round to see what happened, because I think if there's any year for the Leafs to get over that first round hump, I think this is it. I really do. As long as the goaltending stands up, it's the only thing.
Well, one thing I am hopeful is that whether it's during the playoffs or immediately after when the cup is awarded, that you and Will join me. This has been such a blast. I know that you guys are so immersed in all sports, and maybe we could throw in a little basketball and see how our baseball teams are doing. And between you and Will, you guys are just so passionate about sports. I mean, the knowledge that you've dropped. I mean, and everything you're doing now in Atlanta, being in your communications and broadcasting capacity with the Gladiators. Continued success for you, Liam, and really, really looking forward to doing it again soon.
Thank you. Likewise, Randy. And again, we're going to have you on the PNG Sports Show sometime soon as well. And I'd be thrilled alongside Will to join you back again for your podcast after the playoffs or before the playoffs start.
Yeah, sounds great. We'll definitely organize something. He is Liam Gotimer, as mentioned, Director of Broadcasting and Communications for the Atlanta Gladiators of the East Coast Hockey League. My thanks as well to Will Pesek, producer for News 12 out of Hunter Valley in New York. I'm Randy Kure. This is What's Up the Sports podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We will talk to you next time.